So we're going to be looking at the graphing side of the parabola. So we've got a good overlap here between the graphing internal that's to come and the algebra. I've got my notes here. These are actually based on what I gave at level 1 when I used to teach there. And it's parabolas. The thing with parabolas is there's two standard equations and we're sort of morally obliged to remember them. One of them is based on knowing the two spots where it hits the x-axis. And if that's the case, and the a value, which is the thing we always work out last, is the stretch value, because your standard parabola has a particular shape from the vertex out 1, up 1, out 2, up 4, out 3, up 9. But in practice, when we're modeling real situations, that has to be stretched one way or another. So the process there is that we write the general equation, we sub in information we can based on the intersections in this case, and then we take another coordinate we haven't used and we sub it in to find the stretch value, and that gives us the equation. The other form that we would have looked at last year is this form when we know the vertex. So the vertex 432 we know for sure, and so x minus 4 in the brackets plus 32. So we can go straight from the vertex to that form. We still don't know the stretch factor, but we know it'll be negative because it's upside down. So we take another coordinate, 80, we sub it in to find the stretch factor. So that's year 11 stuff. What we do actually is very similar and just a small development on that. So we get a problem like this one. Symmetrical bridge has a central cable, so it's a bit like the Golden Gate, but a bit smaller. The tower supporting it is way smaller, 15 metres high, 40 metres apart. And so we're told that it's a parabola. Now, there's various ways you can answer this, and I noticed that by the time I got to my answer, I'd approached it differently to the mark scheme. But the first thing you've got to do is somewhere on here you've got to establish where you think the origin is. I've chosen to go to the bottom of the left-hand tower. Now, the mark scheme didn't agree with me. The mark scheme decided to make here the vertex and use that, a different style of equation. That actually doesn't matter, okay? But you have to pick something sensible. So something like that point of reference, which I've used, and then I can take all the other information shown and I can form a coordinate out of it. That's the main point. And step 2 is, if that's where the origin is, how many coordinates can we work out? Top of the first tower, and they've got to be coordinates on the parabola. Top of the first tower will be 0, 15. Top of the second tower, it's 40y, but the same height, with 40, 15. The low point in the middle, which is the vertex of the parabola, we know is halfway and a height of 3. So we got 23. So we've got 3 coordinates there. Step 3, we use the most helpful form of the quadratic. Now, this is where you have to do a bit of choosing. In this situation, because we don't have direct x-intercepts, but what we do have is a clear vertex at 23, we've got that form. Now, that's a general form of the equation, but as a changes, obviously the vertex stays put, but the shape of the parabola will change. So step 4, we've got to substitute in, and this usually involves a little bit of working, and I'll be candid with you. Got this wrong first time for reasons I don't want to discuss. So I was using 0, that's incorrect, that meant to be 0, 15. So then my general equation, I replace my y with 15, or I replace my x with 0, and I get working on it to simplify it to find a. I find that a is 3 over 20. I could write that as a decimal, but being sort of old school, I stick with the fraction. And then I have to answer the question, much like the ones we were looking at last week. The final bit, which is important, is to go back to the question in context. So they're saying, show that that post is 6 meters high. I know the post is 30 meters across, I've been told that. And if I'm going to show something, I have to calculate it myself. I can't just sub it in. So I'm using the 30, which I've been told, into my equation that I've developed, and I get y equals 6. So the height of the post is shown to be 6 meters. Now, there could be other questions added to it, and in this case there was in the exam, but the general gist is the same. Then we might be using our algebra to find an intersection at a certain level or something like that. Okay, hopefully that's helpful.